gold is really important. It's going to become more and more important because we are in a superpower war. We've entered upon it in full scope. I think when you market from 42 to 2,900, you tell the world we care about gold. And when the United States says we care about gold, then that's all you need to say. The world will care about gold.
Buy your gold and silver at SD Bullion. Right now, new customers can get gold or silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new.
This speculation about U.S. gold reserves recently kicked off with a post by popular financial blog Zero Hedge. They wrote, "It would be great if Elon Musk could take a look inside Fort Knox just to make sure the 4,580 tons of U.S. gold is there. Last time anyone looked was 50 years ago in 1974. And then Musk replied, "Surely it's reviewed every year." And this kicked off this entire debate about whether the gold is really there. Even President Trump got in on this. He said, "We hope everything is fine with Fort Knox, but we're going to go to Fort Knox to make sure the gold is there. And if the gold isn't there, we're going to be very upset." So before we delve into the rest of this situation, I just want to speculate for a moment. What if the gold isn't there? What would be the potential fallout of missing U.S. gold reserves at Fort Knox?
This is hypothetical because I think it is there. But just to answer your question, we are simultaneously embarking on two revolutions in the Western world. The AI revolution, which is a productivity revolution, bigger than the first industrial revolution, much bigger. And secondly, we are going through a revolution of transparency. The Fort Knox situation is part of this radical transparency revolution that is going to sweep probably the world, certainly America. And it looks like America is trying to pressure Europe to kind of join in on this. But the idea is that if the government does work for you, the people, and it serves you, the people, then the collective brain power of the people and their shared will to know something is what should guide government, and not these layers of secrecy that started right after the World War II era, and everything is we can't say, it's classified, it's sealed, it's a matter of national security, all that kind of smoke and mirrors around everything that has to do with government, because leave it up to us, we know better. So I think the Fort Knox situation is just it's the tip of the iceberg in terms of the radical transparency that you're going to see. The idea is to make the government as transparent as possible.
In addition to Donald Trump and even Rand Paul, he got in on this, said he wanted to get in on the audit. We had former Representative Ron Paul who commented on this debate, and he said that, like you, he thinks that the gold is there, but he said that who owns the reserves is a question because there's a lot of borrowing and gimmickry that goes on. So what do you think he meant by that? I mean, is this a matter of borrowing against the gold? Is there some kind of derivative scheme you think he's referring to? And if the American public doesn't outright own the gold, who might be the owner of that gold?
Well, the American public does own the gold. Part of it is in the Fort Knox. Other gold reserves are held at the New York Fed or the Philly and the Denver Fed. And that's probably what he was referring to, that the gold that's on the books at the Federal Reserve, those might be, those traditionally during Greenspan era and even before, they were lent and borrowed against, and anything that you know that the central banks are doing with gold reserves. It's a financial tool for them, and what he's trying to allude to is whether or not they have borrowed against it in a way that makes it basically a liability and not an asset of the people. Have they abused their the way that they can lend against it or borrow against it or whatever? That is what we're dealing with. And gold at the hands of the Fed has been used publicly. There are minutes. You can go back 30, 40 years and see that this has been happening. And in fact, the very reason why Richard Nixon pulled the United States out of the 35-to-1 gold window is because in the 50s and 60s, it was probably used to finance to some degree the Korean and Vietnam wars, and The Europeans, especially the French, had this suspicion that if there was a real audit, the 35-1 would not be kept. The last full audit was in 1953, or the Fort Knox, and then there was a partial audit in 1974. And what Elon was alluding to is a review, a yearly review, which is done every September. So that's something else. And of course, you had Mnuchin going in in August of 2017 with Mitch McConnell, and they were like, no, we saw it, it's there. So yeah, I mean, it's the common sense thing to do is to go check exactly what we have and get it done. And then the next common sense thing to do is to mark to market it to today's value. It's marked at $42 an ounce. So the balance sheet of the United States should be much larger if it's today's current value. You're talking about $770 billion. It's not a heck of a lot, but actually what it does show is that, one, the government should probably buy more because it's less than $1 trillion in gold. That's nothing. And two, once it's revalued, probably other central banks will go through the same process, because I told you we are in a radical transparency revolution. Once the gold is actually marked to market, it might spark more buying from central banks. And of course, it might prompt the Chinese central bank to be more transparent, and maybe the Russians, etc. So what it does in the end is it brings gold back to the fold as an important part of international finance.
You mentioned that review that's conducted every September. That was what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent recently mentioned in an interview. He said that you can refer to the review that was conducted in September. How confident are you that those reviews are accurate, comprehensive? I mean, as you stated, you think the gold is there, but do you think that it's all been properly accounted for on an annual basis?
You know, gold, you need to move it. It's not like it's a minuscule thing. You need trucks to come in and take it out of a military base, out of the basement. So it's not something that you'd reason has happened and nobody knows about it. That is essentially my starting point here. That if it's not there to a large degree, like if the audit shows that a lot has been taken out by someone, there's a lot here to unpack, because this would include a lot of people as part of this. So that's why my reasoning is that it's probably very much similar to what it should be. Scott Bessent, who's the Treasury Secretary, before that he was one of the world's largest fund managers, and his biggest position was gold, by the way, in his fund.
So he's not unfamiliar with the gold market. And to your point, that makes sense that the logistics of moving that much gold would be challenging. There are a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding the U.S. gold reserves, but I suppose that an audit will be the best way to dismiss those conspiracies.
Sure will. That's the idea. When you bring back the idea that the government is of the people, by the people, and for the people, then everything derives from there. And I think that is the most important thing to understand. The second thing to understand is that gold is really important. It's going to become more and more important because we are in a superpower war. We've entered upon it in full scope. It was, up until now, it was in the shadows, because you just had incompetent presidents during the Bush years, but certainly after 2008, America voted for something un-American, and for 8 years they got an un-American president. And Joe Biden came along after that, and truly, you were on the brink of losing your constitutional republic. You were on the brink. The American people saved the world with this election, and the reason I say that is because now the war between China and between the regimes of the world that control in an authoritarian or in a totalitarian regimes, which are about 35% of the world's regimes, against the liberal world, the Western world, the free world, whatever you want to call it, those two worlds are colliding, and the way that this moves forward is by seizing control over countries that are viably that are not viable without U.S. aid, U.S. support, and U.S. military protection. The U.S. protects most of the world's countries and most of the world's open oceans, and this is that era, that Bretton Woods era, is over. And when you now look at it, every country needs to figure out its own balance sheet, and when it does that, it will favor gold over fiat currencies, and that is reversing this 53-year period where America became so dominant since the early 70s, and certainly since the 90s, that the dollar was deemed as almighty, and now it's gonna it will not be. It's, you know, you have the president saying that the deficits are de facto making us bankrupt. So it's out there in the open that the United States is in damage control, and what the Chinese are trying to do is they're trying to create trade routes that they control around the world through the Belt and Road Initiative, and the United States is now openly competing against these the Belt and Road Initiative. And so when you have that type of environment, every country and every central bank has to go back to the basics, and the basics are gold and silver, which if silver is remonetized, then you can start to think more in lines of the 30 to 1, 20 to 1, 15 to 1 with gold, and that means that implies a lot of upside for silver if that happens.
What do you think the odds of that happening are, a remonetization of silver? Back in October, the Russian state fund began officially adding silver to its investment portfolio for the first time. And at that time, following that announcement, we saw the silver price rising significantly. Now it's corrected somewhat from the highs of October, but that seemed to be an indication that that might be around the corner. Do you think that's something that we're going to witness in the near future or at all?
I mean, look, apart from the last two generations, like apart from the last 50 years, silver has been money for 5,000 years and nothing else was money. The word silver in 70 languages means money, including here in Hebrew. The word money in Hebrew is kesef, and the word silver in Hebrew is kesef. It's the same. It's literally the same word. It's biblical. So for most countries and most cultures, silver in their DNA is money, especially America's southern neighbor, Mexico, where silver was money up until not too long ago. So yeah, I think it will start with one country, just like one country like El Salvador said that Bitcoin is money, and from there it will start to get legitimacy. The Chinese are huge silver buyers. The Chinese people, that is, the Indians. So, I mean, in America, it's a subculture as well. There, for sure, something will happen with this process. We are inside of revolutions. In these revolutions, especially in this one, you go back to what works, and literally, the Constitution says that gold and silver are money. So, if you're going back to the Constitution, and by the way, this is what Trump is really doing. What Trump is really doing, there's three types of thinking. There's thinking along the lines of a present day concept. So you're like, okay, this is the concept, this is the common traditional knowledge. How do we perfect the common knowledge? There's thinking outside of the box. And then there's what Trump does, which is there's no box, there's no nothing. It's a clean slate. And I'm here, I am the president, and I am asking open questions. When was the United States most prosperous? And then you get an answer. And then you're like, okay, well, what about that period can we replicate now? This is what you call clean slate or common sense thinking or first principles thinking. This goes back to Greek philosophers. And when they told him we were most rich under President McKinley during the time of tariffs in the late 1800s, that's when the Edisons, the Rockefellers, the Fords, that's when the Orville Wrights, all of these happened during this time of tariffs. And that's when we were the most rich. So that's how this came to be. It's common sense, right? when he continues along that path, he will realize that backing the currency with gold and silver is essential. And so hopefully I'm not wrong here, but I do think that the process is there. The fact that Elon and Trump are going to Fort Knox, I mean, that's a huge deal, won't you say?
It is. Yeah, it's the first time we've heard anybody mention it in my
Yeah, in
lifetime
50
among
years.
our
Yeah.
leadership. And yeah, to your point, back then that was when we had sound money as well. Did want to get your take, though, real quick on something you mentioned just a few moments ago, which is the gold reserves currently on the U.S. balance sheet are marked at a statutory rate of
Yeah.
$42.22 per
Sense.
ounce. In a recent press conference regarding the creation of a U.S. sovereign wealth fund, Scott Bessent announced that as part of that process, he intends to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet. And this kicked off a lot of speculation that he might mean revaluing gold. Now, he has since denied that, but given that, what do you think he meant by monetizing the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet? And do you think that there is a possibility that a gold revaluation or the U.S. gold reserves could play a role in the creation of this U.S. sovereign wealth fund?
The reason he denied it is he doesn't want to box himself in or commit to it. But he certainly is thinking about it. There's no reason it should be 42 if it's 2,900. The sovereign wealth fund, essentially, Scott Bessent believes that there's two ways to balance the deficit. The deficit is $2 trillion. So Doge is in charge of lowering the 2 trillion to 1 trillion by cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. The second side is Scott and Howard Lutnick, who the Secretary of Commerce, who are going to monetize the asset side of the United States government and create a sovereign wealth fund for its people. That's how you generate an extra trillion a year. That's how you balance a $2 trillion deficit, and obviously other things as well. But here's what it means by that. If the United States government starts a fast permitting of mining, let's say LNG, oil, other commodities, makes loans into mining companies or makes concessions or takes equity in the land, that now turns into assets on the balance sheet. And that's what it means by monetizing the balance sheet. You, the United States people, own the land that is owned by the government. So that's your assets. That's your balance sheet. You should monetize it. You own offshore. You own the oceans surrounding the countries. So that's why you have Gulf of America, because you want to start drilling that. The forests are lumber, etc., etc. So I mean, this goes on and on. The idea is for the U.S. to have what other countries have. The Norwegians have the largest sovereign wealth fund. It's because of their offshore oil, mostly. And universities have endowments. The Emirate countries like Dubai and whatnot have sovereign wealth funds, and they invest in other countries. So that's what he meant by monetizing the balance sheet, because the balance sheet of America is worth hundreds of trillions of dollars, but you need to monetize it. That's what is meant by that. And as part of that, he may add an extra 770 billion by marking to market your gold assets. You already have Basel One, which made gold a tier one asset, so there's no reason not to.
What impact do you think that might have on the gold price or the gold market, if any?
I think when you market from 42 to 2,900, you tell the world we care about gold. And when the United States says we care about gold, then that's all you need to say. The world will care about gold.
Makes sense. I think that's the direction we're heading. Before we wrap things up, Lior, appreciate you joining us as always and giving your insight into these matters. Where can people find more of your work?
Wealthresearchgroup.com is our free financial newsletter. Goes out Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday. For your show, I created 3 special reports on everything that's happening right now. One amazing report is about the clash between the US and Europe. I think it's a must read to understand the world. You can download it at wealthresearchgroup.com/Europe. The second one is about tariffs and to understand why Trump loves tariffs. wealthresearchgroup.com/tariffs. So that is the second report. And the third report is posted on our website. You can go there, click on the special reports tab and you will see it posted right there. And I think, you know, we have covered both politics and geopolitics and economics for many years. And I remember when the mainstream media said it would be tight, it would be in a limbo between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and for months we explained that it would not be close at all, and we called the 312 electorate. So we do a lot of research. You're more than welcome to read it.
All right. Well, I would recommend everybody check out Lior's website. I'll put a link down in the description. Thanks a lot, Lior. We'll have to have you on again soon.
Thank you so much.